talking about what defines an RPG is a very tricky thing. Talking about what defines a subgenre within the RPG genre, it's way trickier. And it's gotten trickier and trickier as the years went on, because, you know, of course, there'll be expansions on all the ideas that make up an RPG, and expansions on all the ideas that make up a specific subgenre. And this video is about the difference between the subgenres of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, and why some people say that Fallout 3 is objectively better than Fallout New Vegas. Now, this is my theory. Fallout 3 is a dungeon crawler. Fallout New Vegas is a Fallout game. Bear with me. So what happened over the years, very simply, is that there were dungeon crawlers. What dungeon crawlers are basically games where you go into a dungeon, either by yourself or with a team, and you kill monsters, you get loot, you rinse and repeat. You can have quests, you can have NPCs, you can have an overarching storyline. It doesn't matter. That's still a dungeon crawler, if that is the fundamental part of the gameplay. Then, over the years, as RPGs developed, games like Wasteland appeared. Games like Ultima Underworld appeared. Like Fallout. Like Baldur's Gate. Very, very different game as well. And they stood in our memory so much because they are very, very different takes on what RPGs were at the time. And this is as I said, this is a really tricky thing to explain. So you'll hopefully bear with me as I will retell as shortly as possible the story of RPG development. But my point is that Obsidian really, really deserves the credit for making something that I am very surprised to see. With the engine of Fallout 3, with an engine custom tailored with years and years of work to make dungeon crawling games, with probably one of the most powerful engines for dungeon crawling games. Because it is, even though it does have its quirks and bugs. Obsidian was capable in 2 years or 1.5 years, however long it took them to develop Fallout New Vegas, they were capable of creating a Fallout game. And Bethesda was not. Because I will explain. So let's start from the beginning. What is a dungeon crawler? Where did it come from? Well, effectively, we need to see the roots of that. We need to go back before role-playing games even existed. I'm not talking from memory because I'm 30 years old. I wasn't alive at the time. But role-playing games appeared somewhere around the late 70s or mid-70s anyway. And I'm talking about pen and paper role-playing games. I think it might have been even at the beginning of the 70s. Can't really tell. I think the first rule set was called Dungeon. And Dungeons and Dragons was a different thing. I think they got into a little bit of legal trouble because of that. Back then, it's very interesting to study all this, but that's not what this video is about. Dungeon crawlers happened before that. Because before role-playing games, and actually the root of role-playing games, is in wargaming. And what wargaming is basically simulating war. Like chess, but more complex. So you had squads and commanders and swordsmen and pikemen, and you could either live action role play it, or you could play it on the board, and all of that didn't involve role playing until it started to do, and that's when role playing games were invented. Now, dungeon crawling was a very easy scenario to game in wargaming, because it's simple. You just have a dungeon. That doesn't need to be a lot of NPCs. That doesn't need to be a very complex storyline. It doesn't even have to be a storyline. It just has to be a setting, and you just uncover a few things. So, world building was important. Storytelling through world building was very important, and it was interesting for a dungeon master to tell a story like that. Oh, you find a skeleton with a note. Oh, you found a statue of who could he be the builder of this dungeon. So it was very easy to make, and it's only natural that the first computer role-playing games that appeared, the first one I believe was a Calabeth. I've never played those. I mean, one of the earliest was Moria, and it was a dungeon crawler. Moria is a dungeon in itself in the Lord of the Rings world. And then there's Arkbang, I don't know, it's the primeval version of Moria in the Lord of the Rings setting. But still, those are dungeon crawling games because it was easy. First person, because first person is the easiest perspective to make. It doesn't have a lot of graphics to make. You just kind of need to draw whatever is in front of you and a monster if there's a monster. Very simple, very easy. But that was the the beginning of role-playing games, the dungeon crawlers. But after, you know, computers got better and graphics got better, there was one series that deserves way more credit than it gets, because it was probably one of the most, if not the most influential RPG series of all time, called Wizardry. It developed into such a fan base, and it developed into such a cult, that there is an entire and very, very influential $1 million subgenre of role-playing games today that is completely based on Wizardry. Not completely, because, you know, there's many years after that, but JRPGs came from Wizardry. Now, what Wizardry is basically a first-person, squad-based role-playing game where you go into dungeons, you kill a lot of monsters, and you still see that in a lot of JRPGs. Now, of course, there's evolutions from, you know, you still have the squad, but then the camera for the combat is different, and then they kind of progressively, the AAA JRPGs anyway, progressively drop the turn-based system, but the fundamentals of the design are still there. JRPGs are still vastly dungeon crawlers. You look at Persona 5, it's a dungeon crawler. I haven't played it though, so I can't really comment too much on that. But there's so much from Japan that comes with that mindset of dungeon crawling. They tell a story, but in the middle of the story, you just go and kill some monsters, because that's the gameplay. That's what matters. It's getting your team into a situation where you just go into a dungeon and explore. And Japan is interesting like that, because Japan really tends to latch to certain aspects of Western culture, let's call it like that, and just run away with it, or just really love the hell out of it, like prog rock, for example. But it's really, really interesting that Wizardry in itself kind of spawned a whole new thing in there. And Wizardry is just that. It's really just that. Even Wizardry 8 that came out, I think, 2002 or 2003. They couldn't have been after that, because 2003 is when Surtech, the company that made it, was killed, basically. That was basically the dark age of role-playing games. But Wizardry really spawned throughout a lot of years, because I think the first one was in the early 80s, so yeah, there's Wizardry 1 through 4, I think, are a different system or different technology, and then 5, or is it 4? I don't know exactly, because I have only played Wizardry 8, and not very, very long. It's a very hard game, and very long as well, but I'm not an expert in that series. But anyway, it spawned a lot of love, and it spawned a lot of spin-offs. Not spin-offs, but inspiration. One of them is Ultima Underworld, which is in itself a spin-off of Ultima, but anyway, Ultima Underworld is, while Ultima, the main series, it's also huge and very influential. It's a top-down, single-character role-playing game. Ultima Underworld is, you could say the same thing, but instead of going over the world, you go underground. It's very heavily inspired in Wizardry, but it's a single-player, first-person, and so it's different, because the other one is turn-based, and it's also real-time. Now, what that means is it's simpler in the combat department, because what they really wanted to do is to make Wizardry but more complex in the character interaction and in the role-playing. And they succeeded. Ultima Underworld is a fantastic game, even for today, but especially for its time. It's a fantastic game. And then there's the second one, and the third one got cancelled, and because the company went under, and that's what spawned the Looking Glass company that made Arx Fatalis, which was basically Ultima Underworld 3, and then that company went on to make other games after that, including Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Dishonored 2, I think the new Thief is also from them, but they're, yeah. Anyway, Ultima Underworld, first person, real-time, underground exploration. That's what came after in the Dungeon Crawler series, or at least in this line that I'm drawing between Wizardry and Fallout 3. Because Ted Peterson, I believe it was his name, one of the 3 main lead designers of the Elder Scrolls, the first Elder Scrolls game, back in 1994, which was when the Elder Scrolls Arena was released. Ted Peterson was a big fan of Ultima Underworld, like many people. And like many games that tried to do what Ultima Underworld did, the Elder Scrolls tried to do that. They built a small team. They had a small team, because Bethesda at that time had been working on a few sports game, I think. Or was it a shooter? No, the shooter came after that. They had sports game before that. And they were newcomers because they hadn't done a role-playing game before. But they loved playing role-playing games. And that's really what matters, isn't it? That's really what matters. If you have your heart in the right place, yeah, maybe it's not going to be as good as it could be, but it's still it's probably going to be a nice game. But if you're, you know, if you don't have your heart so much in the right place, yeah, and if you're just trying to reap those guys off, yeah, sometimes it tells. Sometimes it tells. More on that later. But what Bethesda did in 1994, actually they started in 1991, I think that's when the Elder Scrolls Arena started development, is they looked at Ultima Underworld and said, let's make our own game, let's make our own lore. And they made a huge amount of lore. It wasn't Ted Peterson though that wrote, I forget the name of the guy that created, but this is very, very important as well. Anyway, they were such newcomers, and it is a very complex setting to do, a very complex system to do role-playing games, that I believe there's an interview with Ted Peterson where he says that he talked to some of the guys at Surtech, and they laughed at him. I'm not sure it was unkindly though, but they laughed at him for even saying, oh, maybe we're gonna try and do this, because they didn't believe they could do it. And they pulled it off. The Elder Scrolls Arena got a lot of awards, because what it did well. It made dungeon crawling into a very, very deep and complex system. It made strides forward from what Ultima Underworld was. And they wanted that. Then after that came Daggerfall, the second The Elder Scrolls game. Actually, after that came Battlespire, or was it? Anyway, in the main series, Daggerfall is the second one, which even more expanded. It made a huge overworld. It's the size of Britain. The world of Daggerfall is the size of Britain. It's none of these puny, 16 square miles or whatever. That's nothing. Daggerfall is enormous. It's all procedurally generated still, but it's all empty. But still, it's a game. Daggerfall came out in 1998, I believe, 1999. Anyway, it's a very old game. It's free, by the way. Check a link in the description if you wanna look into it. It still plays, at least in my Windows 7 machine, and it's a very interesting game. And I will be doing a Let's Play of it sometime in the future. But Daggerfall is still a dungeon crawler. Effectively, what it is a game with a bunch of towns on the world and a bunch of dungeons on the world. You travel from place to place, going to dungeons, get loot, kill monsters, get experience, get special items, get unique NPCs, talk to them, get quests, do this, do that, and all that. And that's what Daggerfall is. Now compare that to Morrowind. Now Morrowind has a different rendering engine. Morrowind is the third Elder Scrolls game. Morrowind is a different engine, but it's still very much a Daggerfall game. It's a refocused Elder Scrolls game. It's like Daggerfall, but instead of being just so huge and so sprawling where the player is going to have a huge amount of trouble even finding the relevant quests, because if he doesn't go to that house in that town, he's not going to get the quest for the main quest, or if he doesn't go over there, he doesn't get that option. There's like a huge amount of possibilities in Daggerfall. So what Morrowind did was kind of, let's bring it all back, let's bring the chickens all back home to roost, and just kind of refocus this thing into what we really want. And instead of just having a lot of dungeons with nothing, let's make them have all very interesting things. And that's what Morrowind is, and that's why it got so much praise. And Oblivion came after that, tried to do the same thing, and Skyrim came after that, tried to do the same thing again. Just more and more story, more and more voice acting, and just it's polished for a mass market, and it's a whole story in and of itself. But the line of dungeon crawling, it's still the same thing, and you can see that in Skyrim, because what you do in Skyrim is go into dungeons, get loot, talk to characters, get quests, go into dungeons, get loot, get experience, look at things. And that's what dungeon crawling is. Now, there's a lot of dungeons, but you know, that's what Daggerfall was, and it still was a dungeon crawler. And proof of that is that a lot of people don't even play the Elder Scrolls games for the story. They just go around the world and do their own thing. That's proof of dungeon crawling right there. Now, why am I talking about the Elder Scrolls? Because in some people's minds, Fallout 3 is Oblivion with guns. Now, this was actually admitted by Bethesda later on. I haven't been able to find the quote. I might be wrong about that, actually, but I remember seeing an interview, and there was a big fuss in certain parts of the internet where, oh, look at that, they're them admitting that Fallout 3 is just Oblivion with guns. And this was in relation to the development of Fallout 4, because they didn't want Fallout 4 to be Oblivion with guns, and they succeeded, which is a whole other thing in and of itself. But Fallout 4 is still a dungeon crawling game, and if you want proof of that, just look at how well survival mode works. Just look at how well how still people say that Fallout 4, I don't care for the story, just go around and get, you know, do all of your things. It's still a dungeon crawler. And my point is, Bethesda doesn't know to do anything else. One of the most relevant lines before Fallout 3 was released, when people were, what is it gonna be? Are they gonna do top-down, turn-based? Oh, it's Fallout. Because nobody knew what Bethesda was gonna do. Bethesda was completely silent. They didn't listen to pretty much anybody. They made, well, at least according to what we know, they made a few focus groups with people from the community as well. But what they said is they weren't. This was an interview, I think, with Todd Howard, not Pete Hines, with Todd Howard, which is the main producer at Bethesda, or was anyway. He said that Bethesda wasn't suddenly going to do something that they weren't okay with, that they weren't accustomed to. They were going to do what they did best, and they were going to do what they did best. This was one of the most held to lines before we knew anything about Fallout 3 in E3 2005, I think, or 2006. That was at E3 that we saw for the first time Fallout 3. I didn't, but I know people who did. I know personally people who did, and they said it was amazing. Now, I know for a fact that that person that I'm talking about didn't like the first Fallout, because he reviewed the first Fallout and he gave it a 3 out of 5. But yeah, well, everybody has their taste, and that's precisely the thing. Why some people like Fallout 3 and not Fallout New Vegas? Because Fallout 3 is a dungeon crawler and Fallout New Vegas is not. Now, I've talked about what Fallout 3 is. Let's talk about what New Vegas is and what Fallout is. When Fallout started development in 1995, it was as a B game. It wasn't meant to be a main hitter. Interplay was a huge company. It was still headed by Brian Fargo. It was developing games, firing on all cylinders. They had like different studios. They were starting to have different studios on different genres because they were so spread out. They had platformers, they had strategy games, they had clickers, they had God knows what. Interplay was enormous. Probably the most important PC publisher at the time. And in 1995, I believe it was Tim Kaine that started the development. He basically, well, the way, they don't work like this anymore, many companies don't work like this anymore, but the way companies used to work back then is they had timelines, and the programmers or the artists, they would do their thing, and if they have free time, they would do other things. In the company's time or in their own, with the company's property, like computers or not. And they did a lot of different things. They experimented a lot, and this is still done in proper development companies, but a lot of them don't do this because they try to min-max everything, and that's what Sierra did, and that's why they went bust. That's what they get. Haha. Sierra was actually one of the big profile changes in the company that did this. Basically, they were like this before, during Diablo 1 development, for example. Sierra was just a publisher, though, but still. In somewhere around 2002, Sierra kind of, oh, let's optimize everything and just, yeah, just cut. And what do you need to do? You just need to spend an hour here, you're gonna have an hour here. And they just try to minimize, basically, maximize profit, minimize expenditure, and they screwed up everything because developers and creators, they thrive on all the, okay, I have an afternoon to do this, I did it in 1 hour, and I'm gonna spend 3 hours thinking. And that's what you do when you're a creator, and that's important, that's very, very important. If you're an engineer, it's the same thing. And in engineering companies, if you don't have time to do other things other than your work, you're probably not gonna stay there for very long, and the company's either gonna always be working with new people, or they are gonna go under eventually. But that's a whole different story. What happened in Interplay was that they wanted to make something different, and that's why Fallout is post-apocalyptic. They also liked Wasteland, so there's a lot of inspiration there, but it was a very big hit for many reasons, and one of them was because it didn't have elves. It was an RPG without elves, and without orcs and dwarves. What was that all about? So that was a very important aspect of the propagation of Fallout as a fan base. But the other bit was that it was different to everything that came before it. It didn't focus on getting weapons or loot or experience. It didn't focus on that, to the point where I believe it was Tim Kaine, again, one of the 6 people that made Fallout, and probably the father of Fallout, but not just by himself. Tim Kaine said something that Fallout is about. I can't really quote you directly on that, but Fallout is about exploring how people live in a post-apocalyptic world and how they cope with each other and with the difficulties of the wasteland, not about upgrading our plasma rifle or getting the next suit of armor. And what Interplay did, and thank you Interplay, thank you Brian Fargo for doing this, is they saw the potential of Fallout and they said, hey, let's publish this properly. And by the time of Fallout 1 development, they had testers that were working actually for free outside of their hourly rate. They just wanted to play Fallout. They just wanted to try it because they were so interested in the game. People that were working at Interplay, they were they got out of work at 6 or at 5, and they would just stay in the company to play Fallout or just, oh, let's look at this. And by the time Interplay was actually spending money in voice acting, and I remember reading or hearing an interview with Leo Boyarsky about the voice acting, and when they went to just, there's big names, there's big people that were hired for Fallout as voice actors, and they were like, oh, this is Ron Perlman over here. Oh, well, actually, that was another one. Was it? Well, Ron Perlman makes a lot of funny stories. Not funny, but really interesting stories and funny as well. But interesting stories such in general when he is recording. But they were just, oh, look at that! It's the MacGyver dude. Or just that was very interesting, and it was a sign that Interplay really believed that game had potential. And that continued after Fallout 1 is released, because it was such a different game. It had high production values, even though it didn't have a 3D environment or very high detail and all that sort of stuff, because it could have had that if it had been developed to be a AAA game. Fallout 2 was released just in a year because they just wanted to maximize profit, and if they had to wait another year or 2 years after Fallout 2 or Fallout 1 was released, they would have to make a new engine, so they just, let's make this game in a year, or less than a year actually, because it was 11 months. And because it needs to go gold, it was effectively 9 or 10, but still. Anyway, Interplay changed the development of Fallout so much that Brian Fargo eventually left the company, because we started to feel the grip going away and starting to see Fallout going to a place that he didn't really agree with. And did I say Brian Fargo? No. Tim Kaine left the company, Leonard Boyarsky left the company, and Jason D. Anderson also left the company. 3 of the big names of development of Fallout left midway through Fallout 2 because they didn't agree with it. Now, Chris Jones still stood, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the other 2. I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And Chris Jones, I think, was still working at Interplay a few years ago, because Interplay takes a long time to die, apparently. But Fallout is a different game because it doesn't focus on dungeon crawling and doesn't focus on getting experience or just exploration even. It doesn't even focus on exploration. It focuses on world storytelling, on having a little bit of thing here and a little bit of thing there and just connecting the dots, like learning about Richard Grayson. Richard Grayson, I think it's the name. Learning about the Master. Learning about what is the weird vault under the cathedral. And these are not spoilers. If you haven't played Fallout 1, go ahead and play it right now. People say, oh, the graphics. No, the graphics, no. You still play Hyperlife Drifter or things like Immortal Planet. Those have the same those have worse graphics than Fallout. You play Neo... No, actually, Neo Scavenger does have worse graphics than Fallout. But Neo Scavenger is a fantastic game. But, don't mind the graphics. Think of it like an indie game of today. There's a lot of pixelated indie games right now. Think of it all. Stardew Valley. You complain about Stardew Valley's graphics? You don't? Don't complain about Fallout 1's graphics. Anyway, people complain about the graphics, but, they're just used to see role-playing games as being just high-profile, The Witcher sort of looking things. And that's not what Fallout was. And Bethesda actually Interplay never managed, after Fallout 2, they never managed to recapture what Fallout is. Bethesda didn't. Bethesda didn't manage to capture this. Fallout 3 is still very much a dungeon crawler with a veneer, with a veneer of Fallout on top, with a veneer of storyline on top, and the mere fact that there's so much storyline steps and all that sort of stuff, that should be a sign. And you can see in Fallout New Vegas that there's not nearly as much storyline as there is in Fallout 3. You kind of just go here, and you get whatever thing it is, and there's like 2 big parts of the storyline before you figure out what the chip is, because there's a chip, there's a platinum chip, and then after you figure it out, and the second part is awesome. I really enjoyed it, but Fallout New Vegas captured what Fallout 1 and 2 were. And people complain, oh, it's empty. It's not actually empty. But if you're expecting to, oh, let's go into a dungeon, let's spend a whole hour into this dungeon just killing things and getting loot. That's not Fallout New Vegas. It's not a dungeon crawler, sorry. People complain that there's nothing to do. There's way more to do in Fallout New Vegas than in Fallout 3. It's just not going to dungeons. I spent multiple streams of 3 hours. I do 3-hour stream at least. I spent multiple streams going around and just talking to people and just exploring things and understanding things and theorizing things, and it all connects, and in more interesting ways than, oh, this guy over here died because he didn't, 200 years ago I should say, this guy 200 years ago before the war died because of that, or oh, these guys really hate those, and I'm referencing specific things in Fallout 3, but in Fallout New Vegas it's not like that. There's so much depth to all the side quests, there's so many things, and the nuance of the writing is brilliant. It's actually, I really need to make a video about this, but the writing in Fallout New Vegas is too good for Fallout. It's too good for Fallout. And there's bits, specifically the stuff that Chris Avalon wrote in Fallout 2, there's bits that are really well written in Fallout 2, that kind of mimic that are kind of on par with Fallout New Vegas, but you can see it from the beginning, the writing in Fallout New Vegas is too good for Fallout. And it's weird for me to say that, but you can see Fallout is not the most well-written game. When somebody says, oh, I love Fallout because it's so well-written, no, it's not. It's not. It's really not. Well, it's not badly written, it's competently written, but you see, like, you go into Shady Sands and you talk to, what was her name? Catherine? There's a lady in the beginning of Shady Sands, and she has really kind of crappy dialogue. It's like, it's by the numbers dialogue, actually. It's like, we need to introduce things. It's just like exposition and exposition, to the point where you get experience after you hear all that sort of stuff. It's like a chore. Is it chore? Is it with CH? A chore. I don't know. Anyway, the writing in Fallout is not the focus point. It's how everything connects. That's what Fallout is. And Fallout New Vegas really puts a lot of emphasis on the writing, and that's okay. And that's how they advanced the series. And I really fail to see any downsides to that. But the most amazing thing is not the writing in Fallout New Vegas. It's not the amazing quests that exist every once in a while. And the characters that are interesting. Because there are there's many characters that I can think of the top of my head, having just finished playing it, that I really find interesting. I mean, there's a guy in a I don't remember where he is, but it's like he's a sergeant or something that is kind of, he doesn't really agree with the war of that the NCR is waging, and he's a high-ranking officer and he's doing things and he's interesting. There's a super mutant that is crazy and absolutely crazy. There's companions like Veronica and Boone that are, I mean, Veronica is amazing, but Boone is really interesting. I really enjoy that. There's the guys at Prim. They're kind of not very well fleshed out. They're still better fleshed out than a lot of games. But how long am I going? Oh my god. I'm sorry that I'm just rambling. But Fallout New Vegas captures what Fallout is. That's not why people don't like it, though. I'm not saying that people don't like Fallout because it's Fallout. What I mean is, I'm not saying that people don't like Fallout New Vegas because it's Fallout. I'm saying that people don't like Fallout New Vegas because it's not a dungeon crawler. And that same love that the Japanese, and not just the Japanese, have for wizardry, it exists in a lot of RPG fans. It's the same love I have for Darkest Dungeon, for example. It's really, really cool. Same love I have, and to a big extent when I play games like Morrowind, or even Baldur's Gate in a lot of aspects. Baldur's Gate is another story in and of itself, but people are expecting that. That's why I personally think that Fallout 4 is an incredible achievement of design. I've never played it. Well, I've played it, but I haven't finished it. I played like 4 hours. The writing, oh my god, that's bad. There's so many weird things in Christ, Fallout 4, but Bethesda managed to deliver something that it didn't exist before. A dungeon crawler with surviving elements, with modding capabilities that spawns such a huge amount of love from, you know, very much specific sub-base of the fan base, or some subset of the fan base. But I think they did it on purpose. I think they looked at what the market was and just figured, if we do this, you know, we're gonna alienate a lot of people, sure, but people are gonna enjoy, some people are gonna enjoy this, and they are gonna keep buying. And yeah, it's weird. It's really weird what they turned Fallout into, Bethesda. But I'm really glad Obsidian got their hands on Fallout and made New Vegas. I personally would have preferred if they made their own game. And I think Obsidian, when they make their own original stuff, they really shine. Well, I'm only really talking about Tyranny, to be honest, because Alpha Protocol, no. But I want to see more games like Fallout New Vegas from Obsidian, and I wished Fallout New Vegas wasn't rooted on the engine of Fallout 3, because it would have been a better game. It would probably have been top-down turn-based. Just go with top-down turn-based forever, please, and make Pillars of Eternity turn-based as well. Anyway, I'm done rambling. Well, actually, for this bit, I have still a few things to come, but thank you very much for staying with me. Please stay a little bit longer, because I have a few things still to say, but that's that. That's my opinion. Leave your comment down below about all of this. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in 6 seconds. Let's talk about games that came out over the last couple of weeks. Well, I say games, role-playing games that came out over the last couple of weeks. It's been a kind of a... hasn't had a whole lot of games that are worth mentioning. There's one that I felt I could mention called Blue Horizon. It's sort of an exploration-based, sort of crafting, exploration, action role-playing game. It's an interesting thing. Look down below for the links. And there is Darkwood now. This one is really, really cool. I have seen a video of it, but I haven't played it. I haven't gotten it for myself, and I wish I did, but I don't really have time to play it. But I might. It's a top-down survival horror game with RPG elements, as far as I can tell. It looks really, really cool, and it's also pretty affordable. Right now, it's 14 euros. So links in the description if you want to check those out. Also, this last week I found, well, actually, the week before the last week, I found an amazing channel. It's just such an amazing channel called Lindy Beige. It's awesome. It's awesome. The guy that runs the channel called, I think it's Lloyd. He's not called Lindy. Isn't that a girl's name? I think he says Lindy because that's a dance, and he's a dance teacher. He's also a historian, aficionado at least. I don't know if he actually has a degree, but he knows a lot of stuff about tanks, about weapons, about medieval weaponry, about medieval strategies and history, and he likes video games, he likes cinema. It's just such a vast amount of videos that I just keep binge watching them, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing channel. You really should check it out, because if you like anything about role-playing games, you will like at least some of his videos, and he does have an amazing voice and a very interesting sense of humor. Well, it's them Brits, really. But the video that I want to bring to your attention today is directly related to role-playing games. He actually mentions role-playing games. Actually, he mentions just games in general, and it's probably talking about stuff like Dark Souls and things like that. It's called Back Attacks, historical reality, or gamer trope. And what he's mentioned, back attacks is just backstabs, really, but it doesn't need to be a backstab. He makes extremely good points about that, and it's just something to think of. Regarding this, excuse the hiccup, regarding the back attacks, I feel that it's not just back attacks. If you watch his video, you'll see what I mean, but it's not just back attacks that his points refer to, but also about engagement in combat. If you've played Pillars of Eternity or if you've played Tyranny, you've seen what happens when your character gets next to another character. They basically get engaged, and if any one of those characters moves outside of that zone, they get the opposite. The other character gets an attack of opportunity, and this is actually a fundamental aspect of the positioning system in both Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny, and it's something that a lot of people don't like. I tolerate that, but if you watch this video, Obsidian, you're not watching right now, so you're not gonna watch this video. Please watch that video even though you're not watching right now, because your next game really shouldn't have engagement. Just make it grid-based, turn-based, just please. They're not gonna do that. They're gonna have engagement and all that. Anyway, I tolerate it, so I can't really complain too much, but there really isn't a point. Watch Lindy Beige's channel. If you're not gonna, please just watch this video. It's amazing. It will change your perspective on combat, honestly, unless you already believe what he believes, but still. And if you've made it this far in the video, you're amazing. I really have to thank you so much for watching all the videos, really, but I really do mean it. You're amazing. You're amazing because every person that likes RPGs, every single one of those people are amazing. Every single one of you is amazing. So I really believe that. I've never met a person that likes RPGs that is not an interesting person. And some of them are weird. Some of us are weird. I am very weird. I'm really very weird. I need to make a video about how weird I am. But that's another point. That's a +1. It's amazing +1 because you're weird. Because I'm weird, so I'm amazing +1. But this section of the video is just to thank those of you that are supporting me on Patreon, because I run a Patreon page. You might have noticed at the end of my videos I have I've been putting a little annotation up there. I could actually point it. It's kind of tricky to see over there in my preview. Up here, I have an annotation for my Patreon page. If you want to check it out, basically what Patreon is crowdfunding. YouTube has been going through a few crazy things for a few months now regarding advertisement, and it's very tricky to survive on YouTube advertisement. For anybody, really. For big channels are really struggling. Small channels are struggling as usual, more than usual. And I wish that someday, I'll be able to make YouTube videos full time. Maybe I'll be able to make just more videos, even if I don't do it full time, because that's what I'm trying to do with my stretch goals. There's a lot of things that I want to do here on YouTube, but I have a full-time job. I'm a web developer, so it's really tricky to just tell my boss, hey, I'm not gonna work anymore, sorry, bye, and then I don't have money to pay the bills effectively, because really that's what it is all about. So yeah, those of you that are supporting me on Patreon, and of course also subscribe to me on Twitch, and those of you that do that, I really want to thank you very much for your support. You're amazing. You're very, very generous, and I can't thank you enough. So what I can do at least is thank you in this video. So Rob Anybody, thank you. Robert Davern, thank you very much. Paul Bible, Joshua A. Ennis, Atom Collider, sorry. Thank you very much for your support. Eric Todd, thank you. Christopher Chilton, Michael Grayson, Grigory Krasikov, thank you so much for your support. The Matt Larkin, and Andre Foral, thank you very much for your support, guys. You're amazing, and I hope I deserve your continued support. I do what I do because of you. And even if you don't support me on Patreon because you can't or you don't want to, that's fine. I also do this because of you. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the last little bit, because I end all of my weekend updates with a quote. This one is relevant. This one is a quote from Josh Sawyer, lead developer of Fallout New Vegas. In general, I believe people attribute too much to project directors. And this is an interview where he talks about the freedom he gives to people, and what he talks about other things as well. But this question in particular is what people do in general, what dialogues he actually wrote, what quests he made, and all that. And he just focuses really on the main direction, the main tone of the game. That's what lead directors do, really. Unless they're in a very, very small team, they usually aren't going to have the final say. They do have the theoretical final say on everything, but they're not going to have their hand on everything. They have other things to worry about. They have to answer a lot of stuff. So Josh Sawyer made a fantastic job leading the team that made Fallout New Vegas. I am really glad he did it, and I really like Josh Sawyer and the way he explains things. I think he's a very good leader of people. I don't agree with everything he says, but then again, I respect him enough to not giving him the benefit of the doubt is the least I can do. Not even that. I know I don't have the experience, and even though I disagree with some things, I'm just like, he probably knows best. I still don't agree with some of the things, specifically on some of his decisions regarding Pillars of Eternity. I also think he did a fantastic job in Pillars of Eternity, and I'm very much looking forward to Pillars of Eternity 2. Have you what's kickstarted it? No, it's on a different channel. But are you guys looking forward to that one? Anyway, that's coming out next year, I believe. But yeah, that's that for this weekend's update. I'm sorry I didn't have I missed last week again, but I couldn't do it. Just didn't have time. Let's take a few hours. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye bye.